We're going to switch gears now, and we're going to be hearing from the team at HM Klaus about breeding tomatoes for tomorrow. HM Klaus and our other companies have prepared video presentations, and then they'll join us live for Q&A following each segment. So presenting this morning from HM Klaus are Jason Burney, Product Manager, Fresh Market Tomato, Bernie Hamill, Technical Sales Representative, Johnny Parker, R&D Trail Specialist Global Coordinator, and Anthony Farandelli, Research Associate. I will hand it over to you.
Hi, my name's Jason Burney. I work as a Solanum Product Manager with the Marketing Group for HM Klaus. We're filming here today from Davis, California, one of our head offices, where we also do a lot of research and development work, but also have offices for all the other parts of the business that we have. You'll see behind me one of the R&D blocks that we have for tomatoes that we're doing crossing blocks with for a lot of different markets in the world. So a pretty interesting place to be, even in the middle of winter. Thank you for joining us for this virtual event. We're glad to have you. Unfortunately, with this global pandemic that we're still seeing today, we've made some necessary arrangements to make sure we can deliver some news and information about tomatoes and the work that we do within that segment. Let me pass it to Bernie Hamill to give you more updates on where tomatoes have been in the past and perhaps where they're going to be in the future.
I'd like to welcome you to our beautiful research center down here in Immokalee, Florida, and try to give you some information about Florida and the fresh tomato program here at HM Klaus. Tomatoes were actually found for the first time in South America, and when they were transported to Europe, they were related to the nightshade, and so for a long time people thought they were poisonous and wouldn't eat tomatoes, and at some point in history they were known to be or thought to be an aphrodisiac, and such they got the name love apple. We started producing winter tomatoes in Florida probably in the early 1900s because we found that we could produce fresh high quality tomatoes in Florida in the winter time when everybody else in the United States was under snow.
Thanks, Bernie, for that interesting detail about the history of tomatoes for America. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Johnny Parker. He works in research and development out of Florida and helps assist breeders in determining which varieties move forward in our breeding program. He's here to talk to us about our station in Immokalee. So here's Johnny with some details about that.
I'm the Global Coordinator for the Research Trial Specialist team here at HM Klaus. Our team helps to find new varieties, and that's kind of what I'll be talking about a little bit today. The HM Klaus Research Station was put on some land that we leased years ago to create an on-farm model. This is something that previously we didn't have. We farm tomatoes, squash, hot peppers, bell peppers, corn, beans, pumpkins, okra, watermelons, melons. We do a little bit of everything here. It was opened, I believe, in 2003, and it encompasses about 50 acres. And we also recently acquired another piece of land in Felda, Florida, about 30 minutes north of our current research station, and it's kind of our overflow catch because we do quite a bit of research here, so it's nice to have that little bit of extra land.
Thanks, Johnny. My name's Anthony Farandelli. I'm a breeding research associate in Davis, California for HM Klaus. When we're talking about tomato breeding, we're referring to using traditional breeding methods to improve traits in tomatoes. Some of these traits are things like yield, shelf life, color, flavor, and other important things for the consumers and growers. We do this by developing hundreds of varieties a year and trialing them in their target markets. This intensive trialing process can take up to 5 years from going from our initial trialing of R&D varieties to a fully commercial variety. I'll pass it over to Bernie to talk a little bit more about the specifics of some of these traits.
Yield is probably the most important component that you can have on a farm, because how many boxes of tomatoes you can pick per acre determines how much you're going to get paid. Now, as we lose land, yield per acre becomes even more important, because we're trying to feed millions more people on the same or less amount of land, which means that you're going to have to get more yield per acre, or people won't be able to enjoy the tomatoes we produce. Shelf life is a component as it moves through the value chain. As we produce firmer varieties, they'll be able to survive the rigors of going through the chain to get to the grocery store, and have the shelf life that people need in order to have tomatoes that don't rot. When I started in this industry in the early 80s, Florida probably had a population of about 10 to 12 million. We just passed 21 million in the latest census. So that said, we also grow tomatoes on the warmest land that we can find, which usually is along the coasts, and that is also where people are settling when they move to the Sunshine State. As a result, we have to find ways to get more yield on the same amount or on less land. With the help of the universities and what we call the Green Revolution, we have probably about 33,000 acres of Florida, and we're producing the same or more amount of tomatoes that we did back when I started in this business in the 1980s. I think that is it says something very great about the growers in Florida, about us as an industry, and about us as seed companies. I think we can be very proud of that.
Thanks, Bernie, for that interesting information. So we consider yield as a trait, and it actually all starts here. What you'll see behind me is a crossing block, and you generally have a male and a female, both of which have desired traits for a given market. What actually happens here, we get a lot of help from our other colleagues. They come in and make crosses between the male and the female to give us what we have as a hybrid today. So with that given hybrid, we give that to people like Johnny Parker, who I mentioned before, who start looking at it at an R&D stage. Then once we start collecting data on yield and quality, how it stands up to bacteria, for example, in the humid weathers of Florida. Once they start ticking the boxes or passing the tests that we have internally, then it starts moving through more of a development stage. Then it goes to people like Bernie Hamill that are on the floor, and then they start showing their growers and their customers to see what they think of our new product. So in today's challenging market, resistances are a must-have. Otherwise, a grower won't have a variety that's viable for the field, and he won't have a product to sell at the end of the day. So let's pass it to Johnny Parker to give us more details on resistances in the marketplace.
Depending on the severity of the diseases and how bad the outbreak in a particular area is, it can severely affect the supply chain for tomatoes. There may be several people who remember years ago when you would go to a Wendy's or a Jack in the Box or anywhere you would get a fresh tomato on a sandwich, and they would charge you an extra 50 cents. And the reason for that is we had unprecedented issues with disease and issues with freezes. The diseases can affect global seed supply. Generally, it's not the same type of disease that affects it, because obviously you're harvesting the fruit for the seed and not for consumption. But if you get certain types of disease in your crop, it can affect the ability to sell that seed to customers, which means they can't plant the seed, which leads to a decrease in crop acreage, which in turn could lead to a supply chain issue. Also, depending on the disease you get, it could in fact cause the fruit not to ripen, and if it doesn't ripen, the seed doesn't mature. If the seed doesn't mature, we can't use it for the subsequent crop. We have a new saladette called Da Vinci, and a saladette is more of the elongated type tomato. Instead of a round, it's more elongated. Da Vinci has yellow leaf curl resistance, tomato yellow leaf curl resistance, Fusarium race 3 resistance, and nematode resistance. It has a great set. It has a crimson gene on one parent. It also is a very aggressive plant, and the size is very good up and down the plant. From what we're hearing from growers who are looking at the variety, the yield is very, very high. Then we have a round tomato, HM 8148, which has tomato yellow leaf curl resistance, Fusarium race 3 resistance, and Fusarium crown rot resistance. Again, brings a lot to the table, has the size that growers and producers and consumers are starting to request. It's got good flavor, good color, and high yield.
Thanks, Johnny. Great information. So in addition to these traits like yield and shelf life, at the end of the day, these tomatoes are going to end up on a consumer's plate. So we need to figure out ways that we can improve the quality of the tomato for these eating experiences. So something like flavor is really important for us, but it's a really big challenge to try and figure out how we might bring a better flavor to the tomato. One of the ways that we do this is through a consumer taste panel. We can take a lot of different varieties and put them out in front of people and have them tell us why they like it, why they don't like it, what parts they like, what parts they don't like. In addition to that, we can send the tomatoes to do in-house laboratory testing, where we're testing them for things like sugar, Brix levels, acidity, and trying and combining the information that we get from that and associating it with what the consumers like and don't like to try and study this flavor on a little bit bigger of a scale. In addition to flavor, color is really important. It's important visually for people to see a red tomato that they like. And one of the ways that we can do this is by following certain genes and bringing those genes in by using the traditional breeding methods. One of these genes is called crimson gene. Bringing it on, it's really interesting to study how this gene interacts in the tomato. You find that bringing it on one parent will give you a lighter red color, but bringing it on both tomatoes will give you that really dark, vibrant red, beautiful color that consumers really like and want. In addition to just red colors, we're also looking at different colors. So we might have a darker tomato or even a different shape with a marmande shape. We have one of these that has been very successful in Europe called Adora that brings in a different fruit shape with a really dark purple color that consumers really like. We're looking to expand doing that globally. So I'll go back to Johnny and he can talk a little bit more about the importance of these things in the marketplace.
Over time, we've started seeing a change in consumer preference. It's no longer just, I want a red tomato. It's, I want a chocolate tomato with green shoulders, or I want a yellow tomato with high flavor, or I'd like an orange tomato with green stripes. There's becoming more and more consumer preference to flavor and appearance. There's a lot of people who will tell you that consumers buy with their eyes, and that's becoming very prevalent in the store shelves in today's marketplace. You're starting to see when you go into the supermarkets now, not only do you see the red round tomatoes and the saladette type tomatoes, you'll see Campari type tomatoes, which are the racquetball round type that we get out of greenhouses. You'll see colored tomatoes, you'll see different shaped tomatoes, different sized tomatoes. So tomatoes probably the most widely consumed vegetable in the world, and as such, I think what we're seeing is a shift to different appearances and different flavors and the diversity of the fruit. When people say flavor of the tomato, what they're actually referring to, whether they know it or not, is the sugars in the tomato, the acid in the tomato, the texture of the tomato, and the balance that brings to the table. Everybody's taste buds are a little bit different. Personally, I like a variety that has a little more acid with just a little hint of sugar. My children, on the other hand, they'd rather eat sugar cubes. They could care about the acid. So that's what we're working towards, is finding varieties that appeal to masses and not just a single bland tomato like we've had in the past. Back in 2006, HM Claus released a variety called Scarlet Red. At the point in time that Scarlet Red was released, we had just basically orange type tomatoes that weren't really red. They really didn't have a lot of flavor. They really weren't that great to eat. Scarlet Red came out and it had a crimson gene, it had high flavor, it had the color, and so it kind of changed the game a little bit. And I would say from that point in time, you've seen HM Claus and several other companies start to look at flavor profiles, look at color profiles, and they start bringing that to the table. And as I've mentioned, I think one of the things that HM Claus is getting very good at, and something that you will see come from this company quite a bit in the future, is flavor. Flavor has become very important to the consumer, and as such, it's become very, very important to us. It was always here, but now it's become kind of the forefront of one of our breeding goals, is to have the high flavor, high color, good appearance tomatoes for the consumer.
Thanks, Johnny, for that detail. Here at HM Claus, we have a breeding program in Immokalee, as I mentioned previously. Now, we have a lot of activity stretching from southern Florida all the way to New Jersey and New York. And within all those main growing regions, what we actually do is a lot of R&D development and product development, generally speaking, for the tomato industry. HM Claus is also today well known for our strong leadership in varieties today, specifically things like Red Juice and Red Morning that exist in many markets along the East Coast. We're well known for a variety called HM 1823 out of Florida. It's one of the market leaders as well. So behind that, we have great varieties coming through, varieties called Da Vinci, HM 8148, for example. I'd like to take the opportunity to get Bernie to talk about more of them. And these for us are the tomatoes of tomorrow. So here's Bernie.
We're developing on our farm 2 varieties that I would love to call attention to because they have the things that we're looking for. And one of them is HM 8148, which is a new variety for the field tomato industry here in Florida. It has the disease resistant package that we need because of what I've previously talked about with respect to diseases coming into the state that we've never had before. 8148 has F3, TY, crown rot, nematode, and one of the parents is crimson, which will give us the interior color that we have been lacking in what we're looking for in Florida tomatoes. Another tomato, which I think is going to have a real big impact on the Roma tomato industry, is one we've called Da Vinci. Da Vinci is a very uniform plant. It has uniform and large size fruit up and down the plant, and it has really nice interior color. And again, it has the disease resistant package we're looking for in Florida.
Thanks, Bernie. Like I mentioned before, to develop a tomato variety is a multi-year process. So really the breeding process is to look for the tomato of the future. We do that by looking for ways to improve a lot of the traits we talked about: yield, shelf life, pest resistance, flavor, and fruit quality, or even a lot of different traits that might reduce grower input. For example, there might be a new pathogen that arises, and we'll look for a way that we can bring in a resistance to that to prevent a farmer from having to repeatedly spray pesticides on his crop. Although I can't give away too many secrets, HM Claus is reinvesting 18% of its revenue back into the research and development process, so you know that there's going to be a lot of exciting things coming from the tomato breeding process.
Thanks, Anthony. And that brings us to the end of our short video, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Here at HM Claus, I am really excited about the pipeline of material that's coming through to deliver to the East Coast markets, to really look at delivering varieties with improved colour, improved taste, but also work really well for the growers as well, with improved disease resistances that is much needed for the market today. So we're going to move on to our live Q&A session now, where HM Claus employees, we're going to be there to help answer some of your questions you might have. So thanks again for joining, and I look forward to the tomato of tomorrow.
Jason and Anthony will be joined by Matt Thomas, Vice President of Sales, USA and Canada, and Mark Nereus, Communications Manager. Welcome. Hi. We have lots of questions coming in, so I hope you're ready. I'll just go down the list. Our first question is similar to one from the previous session. How has climate change impacted tomato breeding efforts?
Thanks, Bethany. Anthony, did you want to help answer that one?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that can happen as a result of climate change. So one of the issues might be just unpredictable weather patterns. You have heat spikes, rain events, and so one of the ways you can deal with that is just by ensuring that you have varieties that can withstand some of those things. So for example, heat set, it's really important for when the flowers first set the fruits. And so you can try and find varieties that have the capacity to withstand those hot periods, so that they can actually set fruit. And on top of that, it's really just going back to that trialing network and making sure that the varieties that you have are very adaptable and that they can withstand a wide range of environments, and pretty much deal with anything that could happen as a result of these climate fluctuations and increasing temperatures.
Thank you. Our next question, you talked a lot about flavor, and I know it's going to be unique for everyone, but what are some of those new trends that consumers are asking for? What seems to be resonating? What's most requested and maybe disliked?
It's an interesting question. You're right, Bethany. I think it kind of varies with age group and the typology or the type of the tomato that you see on the shelf. If you look at cherry tomatoes, grape tomatoes, or as we spoke about, a particular color, and you pay generally a higher price or a premium for those sorts of products, you expect a really bright, vibrant color and quite a sweet tomato, because generally they're for fresh market sort of consumption in your salads. So we really see the need to develop sweet, high flavor, high sugar type varieties for the cherries and grapes. But then you look at sort of your standard sort of beef tomato or Roma tomato that you see on the shelf that sometimes is used for the processing market. And in the past, we haven't, or the market really hasn't asked for specific tasting tomatoes for that, because they're sort of sliced up and sent to Wendy's and burger chains and things like that. But these days, in the past couple of years, growers and the markets are trying to differentiate themselves with, again, high quality products. So when you look at determinate beefs, we're trying to develop sort of sweeter, more color, high color tomatoes for that kind of segment as well. So really depends on sort of the segment and the type that you're looking at.
Thank you. And so obviously taste is a key characteristic that you're looking for. But in your breeding programs, I know there are a lot of characteristics that you're looking for that have to come into play. So how do you determine which tomatoes move forward?
Yeah, I can make a start, and then maybe Anthony might be able to add on a couple of things. So somebody like myself and Anthony in a given season, together with the breeder, might end up going through maybe 100, 150 new hybrids at the R&D stage. And then, as we mentioned, we have a critical list of traits that are kind of needed for any given market. So we go through and evaluate them. Specifically, yield is a very critical trait for us. It's very important for the grower and for us as well. And then TSWV, TY, which we also mentioned. And then that gets narrowed down to maybe a top 20, top 25 based on those critical criteria that kind of pass the mark. And then slowly we vet these varieties in the given markets, in the markets we breed in, and then come down to maybe a top 5. And then that top 5 become 1 to 2 varieties that seem to fit really, really well in the market and continue to perform on a consistent basis. And that's how we sort of go through this process of selecting and developing a variety, which can take anywhere up to sort of 5 years to get variety to the market. Did you want to add anything onto that, Anthony?
No, I think you captured it. Just really, the varieties that we're selecting to advance in our breeding programs are something that are bringing something new to the table. So it's an improvement over what is commercially available, and just thinking about something that will be commercially successful in the future needs to bring some sort of improvement. So it could be yield, fruit quality, the plant health, disease resistance. But yeah.
Thanks so much. As you look ahead to the future, what do you see as those major challenges on the horizon, and how are you working now to meet those and meet demand?
Matt, did you want to maybe start the comments there on that one?
Sure. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Bethany. The big challenge that we're facing right now is certainly disease resistance and the necessity to stack traits on top of one another. As climate change affects us, we don't have a specific climate change breeding program, but everything we do is addressing those growers' needs. And as climate changes, as the gentleman from University of Florida talked about, some of the varieties that work in the southern part of the state are moving up to the central and the northern part. It's the same with all vegetables. So really staying ahead of the issues that the growers may be facing is really our biggest challenges, is to stay ahead of if a chemical is restricted in a certain area, do we have the right genetics to continue to meet those growers' needs if they can't use their traditional inputs? So really the biggest challenge is staying ahead of the curve and anticipating what may come in the future.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned viruses. One of the other questions is, have you experienced any problem with tomato brown rugose fruit virus?
It's a good question. We certainly have. It's impacted probably every seed company globally. The biggest impact it's had on us is global seed movements, I'd say, and the additional regulations that most countries and most governments have put in place to allow for, I guess, for us to be more vigilant in seed testing and to be able to test our seed and move it around the country. And as a result, it's more investment for us, and it's a longer process to, again, move R&D seed around, but also commercial seed as well. It also, I guess, gets us thinking about, well, what's our breeding activity for something new like this? So again, it's another sort of roadblock, but also an opportunity and a challenge for us to look at new ways of innovation in bringing new resistances into some of our varieties. So, but for sure, it's been a problem, and I think it's going to continue to be an issue for us, globally speaking, not just for the US, but for everybody.
Thank you. Thanks. Does the local farmer market trend de-emphasize to some extent the need to make a tomato transportable? It's a good question.
Is that question maybe related to field holding and shelf life, perhaps? I'd say.
Jason, I'll jump in on that one.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Certainly the trend has been to have locally produced produce, vegetables. You know, there's definitely a push to eat local. We have many restaurants around the country that are farm to fork. Now, that's great, right? It grows our industry. It opens people's minds to trying more vegetables and having fresh veggies. That said, and we are seeing an increase in that market. However, I live in Madison, Wisconsin right now. It's the farmers market capital of the world. However, our high today won't even get out of the single digits. So yes, there's certainly a big push for farm to fork and for farmers markets and for your home gardeners. But there's a big portion of the country that can't grow year round. So we'll always have a need to have a tomato that's transportable, because there will not be a day when any of us on these calls will be satisfied to walk in the grocery store and not have a medley of tomatoes to choose from.
Definitely. Thank you. What are the breeding challenges to make store-bought tomatoes as good as homegrown tomatoes?
Anthony, do you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. I grew up in California and had a lot of homegrown tomatoes growing up, and it's pretty clear the difference between those tomatoes and the ones you can find in a grocery store. And this has a little bit of overlap with this question about the emphasis to have local farms. So on one hand, if you're producing a tomato that needs to be transported a long time, it can't be picked at the peak of maturity, and really one of the industry standards has been to harvest them when they're at a mature green stage and treat them with a plant hormone ethylene to allow them to mature. And that really just doesn't allow the same levels of sugars and acids to develop as a tomato that you can go and pick 5 minutes before you're eating it. So one of the ways that this is the market trend is showing is that there are more tomatoes that are being ripened on the vine, and we can breed to have tomatoes that work within those systems. And really, it's just a combination of these supply chains and increasing sophistication of the supply chain, going from the farm to a distributor that can get them in grocery stores. And as they can do that in faster and more efficient ways, then you can reduce the time it takes to go from a farm to a grocery store. And really doing things like that, breeding within those systems, emphasizing the consumer traits, can really help to narrow the gap between something that you can grow out in your garden and something that you can buy in a grocery store.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions right now. So as people are maybe thinking of some additional questions, I'll ask a question. How has COVID impacted your operations?
Good question. I can probably start on that in terms of being a product manager. We're often asked to visit our main markets and understand kind of the pipeline and the research activity. And I've been working from home for the past 12 months here in California as well. And unfortunately, I haven't been to Florida, for example, where I'd usually visit that particular area for Solanum, for sweet pepper and tomato, probably 3 to 5 times a year, I guess. So there's that level of impact where travel for us has restricted quite significantly in terms of visiting our main markets and looking at new varieties and things like that. Activities around our main stations have still been stable, and we've been operating just with a high level of caution, I guess, and having the ideal and correct safety procedures in place to make sure that we have our temperatures checked and we wear the appropriate face masks and things like that. So in terms of operations, our global nature as a seed business has slowed up, I guess, but we have still managed to continue sort of normal day-to-day business as well. But maybe from a sales perspective, Matt, do you have some comments as well?
Sure, thanks, Jason. Fortunately, the way that we're set up in the U.S. and in most areas of the world, we have regional teams. So, for example, in the Southeast, we have a large presence in the Southeast and a large team stretching from South Florida up through the Carolinas. As Jason mentioned, he hasn't been able to come and visit California. So there has been more collaboration and work with the different groups where whether a breeder can come or can't come, or Jason isn't able to travel down, our local teams are really picking up that type of activity, and we're continuing to move the products through the pipeline. And that's in terms of our individual, how it's impacted us. It certainly impacted our sales in terms of the connection with our customers. We're not really going into their offices anymore. We are having meetings out in the field with the proper distance and face coverings. So there's no doubt that it has changed our daily life. However, I couldn't be more proud of the organization and our team for pivoting and making the sales continue to happen and meeting the needs of the growers. And I would say it's not just us that's making this happen, it's the whole industry as an essential industry, whether it's HM Claus or one of our formidable competitors. As an industry, we're really keeping it going and working together to provide food sustainability for not just the U.S., but globally.
Great, thank you. Okay, I have another question that came in. What about the passion for heirlooms? How do you promote hybrids?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions there. When it comes to heirlooms versus hybrids, they're very, very different products, obviously. I mean, heirlooms carry some very interesting colors and flavors and textures but they don't have the hybrid vigor and the traits necessary to meet the demands of such a huge population in the US, but globally speaking, but also in some of the environments that a lot of these crops are grown in, especially in open field environments. So that's probably the biggest difference between heirlooms and hybrids. How do we promote them? It's through our teams on the floor that we have, as Matt mentioned. We have sales, PD guys, and girls on the floor doing the PD work, but also connecting with the growers on a day-to-day basis, and also connecting with sometimes downstream marketing operations as well, just to get their feedback and a better understanding of where our products fit in the market. We also have people like Mark that's on the call, part of the communications department that we have, that help do the brochures and the flyers and the promotional content for a lot of our new launches, and help get together this sort of detail for Astra as well. I mean, without those people in our team, we wouldn't have the opportunity to reach out to a much larger audience for our products. So that's generally how we sort of get on the floor and tell people about our new hybrids.
Thank you. Okay, another question. As more countries are putting restrictions on biotechnology, how are you talking to consumers about plant breeding innovation?
Matt, did you want to comment on that one?
Sure. Thanks, Jason. And then and Anthony, if there's anything that I leave out, please feel free to chime in. In terms of the message to consumers, though biotechnology certainly is restricted in many areas of the world, that said, it really hasn't penetrated into vegetables. The cost versus value on field crops for biotechnology is there. And I give an example of field corn versus sweet corn. There's 100 million acres of field corn in the United States, plus or minus. I'm sure it's changed a little bit since I was in that world. To compare to 1 million acres of sweet corn. So sweet corn is one of those crops where it could be a natural transition from traditional breeding to biotech. But the consumer, so first the cost versus benefit isn't there because we don't have the acres, we don't have the volume. And secondly, and most importantly, the consumer acceptance isn't there. They're not comfortable eating a fresh vegetable or fruit that has been bred with biotechnology.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add on to what Matt was saying, biotechnology is a pretty wide term. So there's certain biotechnologies that we could use, which is just seeing what's inside, what genes are already in the tomato, and these are genes that are coming from a natural backgrounds, and it's really just reading and seeing what's there. And then there's other types of biotechnology. They're what are referred to as GMOs, where you're actually going in and introducing a foreign piece of DNA into the genes, into the genome of the tomato to have some sort of effect. And what we're doing now in all of our commercial varieties is just traditional crossbreeding methods. So we're not introducing foreign DNA through laboratory techniques or doing any sort of genome editing right now. And we found that all of the traditionally available methods at this point are sufficient to create progress in the tomato.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. Excellent questions, and we appreciate all of the comments. If you didn't have a chance to ask a question, or if you think of something later, again, you can email those to me or put them in the chat, and we will connect you with our speakers afterwards. But I want to thank all of you from HM Claas for participating today and for the great discussion.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bethany.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye.
Thanks.